Welcome to the AI First Business Podcast with Tina Yazdi, where we show you how companies, teams, and leaders are turning AI hype into ROI.
Hi, Duane. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Ash. Thanks. Good to be here.
Great to have you on. Let's start with Duane. Tell me more about yourself.
I should get better at this, right? And I'm often told I'm too modest with it. So I'm a serial tech entrepreneur, which sounds really wanky. It sounds like something other people should call you. But yeah, so I founded multiple tech businesses in the B2B sort of business, accounting, HR, payroll space. I sold them and done reasonably well from it. And that's it in a nutshell.
Awesome. But you have had a colourful background, as we talked just before we started. It would be great to jump into that because I think there's a lot that entrepreneurs can learn from this. So take me right back to when you were like 16 and were in the world of crime.
I used to get asked how I fell into crime, and I didn't fall into it. I grew up around it. So I grew up in the East End of London, children's homes from the age of 11. Friends were dealing drugs, didn't think much of it. I got involved a little bit on the periphery, but then got to sort of 17, 18, skint, knew my mates were running drugs to the States, sounded like some fun, got involved as a way to make some money, really, and not realising we all run surveillance. So it wasn't long before we were all arrested. I was arrested first in Atlanta, Georgia, with a load of ecstasy tablets. And this is like bulletproof, bullet point version, right? There's much more detail to it. But basically, spent a night with the DEA there, pretending I was going to help them with the onward delivery, which was the funniest night of my life, really. But then ended up in prison in Georgia for a short period of time, a few weeks, maybe just over a month. Eventually brought back to the UK, stood trial with 9 other people, and got sentenced to 5 years and served a prison sentence here in the UK.
A lot of entrepreneurs and founders, they go through mental health struggles. A lot of people from similar backgrounds probably want to get into this space. So where was your head at that point in life?
So with hindsight, right, what I realised is a lot of the people from where I grew up, or I grew up in similar circumstances to me, and I still see it now, even with those that are my age, you end up wherever the wind blows you, right? If you happen to end up in a okayish job, or you happen to end up doing this, doing that, it wasn't because that's where you intended to go. It isn't because there was your parents' guiding hand leading. You just happen to end up there because there's no plan to your life. You just end up wherever. And I had that realization when I was in prison with how the hell did I end up here? And really, it was that gave me the realization that actually, when you look at these people that have done okay for themselves, or you look at anyone really that's in a positive situation, they've got there by intent. Some people might happen to get blown into a good corner by the wind, but you typically don't. So there's a quote: if you don't have a plan for your life, you'll end up part of someone else's plan. And guess what they've got planned for you? Not much. So it's really that whole having a plan and purpose and intent of where you want to go is what I learned from that period of my life, I guess. And that's what drove me onto the entrepreneurial path, if you like, when I got out of prison.
But even before you were kind of blown away, I guess, in the wind of those times, you were into computers, right? You were into programming and stuff like this. And the GoCardless team tell me that you even coded up the integration with GoCardless yourself to begin. So take me back to that time, like what got you into computers?
So I'm a programmer by background. When I run my businesses, the MVP of all the products that we've had, I've built, which means that we've not had to go and raise a load of money and whatever else. So it's been really helpful. But the background to that was being in care, kicked out of school, and at the children's home between 9 and 3, I wasn't allowed to be watching TV. I had to be doing education. And I had these worksheets that were ridiculously easy. Now, come on, I can tell the time already. I'm 12 or whatever, I was 13. And I noticed in the corner this box, it was a ZX Spectrum in the manual. And I said, look, can I work with that during the day? And I said, yeah, whatever, it keeps you out of trouble. As long as you're not watching TV, you can do whatever you like. So, and that's when I got the ZX Spectrum out of the box, set it all up, got the manual, and learned basic from the manual that came with it. And that's where the IT stuff started. So even in my teens, right, when I'm doing all the criminality stuff, I had IT skills. I could have, if I was a bit more purposeful and thoughtful about what I was doing with my life, I could have had a pretty decent career in IT.
What do you think made you entrepreneurial versus, wanting to pursue a career in IT? Because obviously, I think you got blown in the wind a little bit, but there's kind of an entrepreneurial glimmer. You sometimes compare drugs, crime, etc., and the people there. Actually, when you look at it, there was a study done, and they are quite entrepreneurial. So, what brought you down that route versus going down IT and typical career route?
So there's definitely parallels with entrepreneurship and drug dealing, and you can point out a whole bunch of things: calculated risk, buying a product in bulk, selling smaller quantities. But where I was involved in it, I wasn't at that level, if you like. I wasn't seen enough to. So I see entrepreneurial stuff going on with drug dealing. That wasn't necessarily my experience, my personal experience, or personal role in it. For me, it was a necessity. So I got out of prison, and I remember in prison being around a lot of other guys that picture their kids and their family on the wall, and always being thankful that I was doing this on my own. I didn't have kids outside I was missing growing up. And then I got released, and my now wife, then girlfriend, got pregnant very quickly. And there was lots of temptation and pressure to get involved, to carry on being involved with crime. But with that baby on the way and everything else, like, well, I can't go down that route. I don't want to be that guy with the picture of the kid on the wall that you only see visiting hours once every couple of weeks. So determined not to go carry on down that route, but I couldn't get a job because I had this big black hole in my CV. No one was going to give me a job. And the Prince's Trust has come to the prison and talk about what they do in terms of supporting people to start a business, which I hadn't really considered. But it's only because they come and spoke about that. I went and spoke to the Prince's Trust. Well, actually, no, in my last few months at prison, so my wife got pregnant while I was in prison. We had day release at Ford, resettlement. So you can imagine what we were up to when I was out for a few hours. So I'd already come up with this idea in prison off the back of Prince's Trust talk. So when I got out of prison, I was straight to Prince's Trust to get the help to get set up as a one-man web developer.
Okay.
There's necessity rather than any innate entrepreneurial ability, I think.
Yeah, and it's quite rare that it actually comes from necessity. A lot of the time when you look at entrepreneurs, it actually comes from the fact that a lot of them have a parachute, right? If something were to happen, they would actually be able to have the cushion to lie back on.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember someone telling me, so I did have someone I could have gone and worked with hindsight, I think was taking advantage of me at the time and helping to grow his business. So I said, actually, you know what? I'm going to go and do my own thing. And he was like, well, you're going to be knocking on my door in 2 weeks because you're going to have nowhere to live. I had no safety net. So he was probably genuinely concerned, but look, you don't understand how tough this is, what you're about to go and do. You don't want to be doing this. So yeah, there was absolutely no safety net there. Although having said that, there was a good government scheme at the time that for 6 months, I continued to get housing benefits and other benefits paid. So
Okay.
there was the government safety net, if you like.
Yeah, I want to dig into that founding story of Cashflow in a minute. I think it's very intriguing. You've talked about it in other blogs and with other media outlets as well. You were in Atlanta and you got arrested on the way back. Can you tell me a little bit more about the kind of intricacies of that story and your experience in prison following?
Yeah, so I actually got arrested on the way into Atlanta.
Into Atlanta.
Yeah. So what we didn't realise, so we were already under surveillance at that point. The DEA were meant to have followed me when I left the airport because at the UK side of the operation, they knew everyone. They had it all documented. And they were trying to then work out the US side of the operation by cooperating the UK police working with the DEA. But an overzealous custom agent happened to stop me, went through my hand luggage and found a whole load of drugs. So this became the first. So I wrote a book called 4,000 Days that covers the whole story from growing up in care through to this episode, through to building, growing, and selling the business. But this became the first chapter, and it's on Medium as well. The whole story of this night. But essentially, the DA said, "Look, you can either go straight to prison now, or you can help us with the onward delivery of these drugs, so that they can find the people I was delivering them to." And I knew already, because I hadn't made the call back to London, I had to make the US side would have known by now I'd been arrested. I've been in a holding cell for 2-3 hours at this point. So I knew there was no risk of actually leading the DEA to anyone. So I said, yeah, okay, yeah, let's do the onward delivery of the drugs. And yeah, spent a night with them trying to do that. And that all went horribly wrong, but it was a comical evening, really, with hindsight. But after that, yeah, then ended up the following morning, took to Clayton County Jail in Georgia.
And what was that experience like in Clayton County Jail? You talk about it a lot.
Yeah, bloody terrifying, if I'm honest. So you can imagine I'm not particularly large. I'm young at the time. I'm 20, 19, something like that, in a foreign country. Bloody scary going into American prison, definitely.
Yeah, a lot more intense than UK prison.
Completely different thing. So the UK prison, one, you're comfortable, right? Because you know the culture, you understand who everyone is, and there's a lot of reading between the lines that we all do without even realising it. And when you're out of your cultural comfort zone, when all of those radars that you didn't even know you had stop working, it's a different thing. But even UK prisons, the prison service and the prison officers run the prisons in the UK, obviously. That isn't the case in the US. In the US, you are left to it. And when they call them balls over there, we call them screws over it. But when a prison officer comes on the wing, you have to sit down on your hands. And they do what they're doing, they leave, then you get up and you carry on. Because it's the inmates that run the prisons over there and you are left to it. It's a much more violent culture.
Yeah, I can imagine. Did you get in any altercations?
Came close a few times, and I was quite lucky because I got on, because I'm a curiosity, right? I'm this guy with this weird accent, and even white skin. There weren't that many white people in prison over there. There were some, but not many. So I was a curiosity. So the guy that ran the wing, a big guy called Joel, black guy, got on really well with him and spent a lot of time talking to him. So I was very much under his wing after a week or so. But that in itself caused problems because growing up, and we were talking about before we started recording, like what we did in the East End, it's very multicultural. So I didn't clock the fact that if you're white in prison in the US, you only talk to the other white guys. And if you're Mexican, you only talk to the Mexicans. And if you're black, you only talk to the blacks. And of course, I'm talking to the black guys. And that's where I'm spending most of my time. And I had a visit from a lawyer. And the few belongings I had by then, gave to Joel to look after. When I came back, there's a bunch of skinheads around my bed saying, if you need something, you go to your own. You don't talk to the brothers. Whoa. So, yeah, a few times it came close. But, yeah, survived without any scratches, thankfully.
Yeah, wow, it sounds intense.
It was. And with hindsight, so people sort of say, I don't know how you did it, even that and prison here. But when you're put in that situation and you don't have no choice, you survive. I can't, everybody I know in my life, adults, would survive that situation. Most of them say, I could never do that. Well, when you have no choice, you will.
Yeah, you're going to have to do it, right?
Yeah.
So now, fast forward a little bit, you've spent time in prison in the US, you've gone to the UK, you've spent time there as well, and you've been doing a lot of studying in prison, as I understand it, and on kind of computer science, etc.
No, more teaching. So I started, so when you're in prison in the UK, you're either in education, and there's a lot of people in prison that need education, even the basics of literacy and mathematics, or you're working in industry, which is in a workshop sewing boxer shorts. And if you're really lucky, you'll work in the kitchens, but they're sort of the best jobs. But you will be doing something with your time. I didn't fancy sewing boxer shorts, so I put my name down for the computer course called CLATE, Computer Literacy and Information Technology, which I think was a 2-month course. And of course, I knew how to do it, but it was IT related, so I put my name down for it. What I wanted to do was an open university degree in information technology, but it just very clear that it wasn't going to happen very early on. No way. Of course, smashed the course out in a day. It's meant to be 2 months. And the teacher says to me, okay, yeah, I'm impressed, but you're now assigned to me for the next 2 months because that's how long it takes to do this course. So you can help the other guys. So I spent 2 months helping the other guys in prison do the IT course, which is a thin line to tread, right? Because if you're seen to, it's a them and us thing. And if you're seen to think you're one of them, not one of us, when you're actually locked up with this group, it's problematic. So that was a thin line to tread. But yeah, and then that teacher ended up getting ill. So I ended up teaching that course a lot of the time in prison. So I was teaching IT to other inmates, which I really enjoyed.
When you say that's a thin line to tread, how did you do that? Did you get any kind of pushback from anyone, or?
Usually you get people that will make assumptions, and you get it now, right? You think you're better than me because you've got this, that, and the other. Well, no, I don't think that. That's you projecting on me. And it's a similar thing in prison. You get people think, oh, you think you're special because you've got this job and that. No, I don't. And by the time that occasionally happened, I'd been there long enough and and again, you've got the in crowd in prison and was well known to them and was there with a lot of co-defendants as well. So yeah, lucky in the people that I was around that got through that.
And this was more from a space of interest rather than a space of, I want to turn my life around?
Yeah, very much so. At that point, is I need something to do with my time. And if I don't go and it's almost the lesser of two evils. I can either go to this education block and do stuff there, or I can go and sew boxer shorts. It was a no-brainer. It certainly wasn't by this point that I hadn't had that realization moment. And there's a silly story as to how I had that realization moment. So I was also on the orderlies, so I was involved with serving the food on the wing. So 200 guys on the wing, the food would come over, we serve it up. And you can imagine there's perks to that, right? You might get a bit more food. This is so ridiculous, but I like mushrooms. Not magic mushrooms, not just mushrooms that you have with your dinner. And we'd only get mushrooms once a week, and that would be on the Saturday dinner. I've been on this wing for at least a year, if not longer. And it's just a done thing that when the Saturday meal come on, a few mushrooms were put aside, and I'd have them with my dinner. I'd have more mushrooms than everyone else. It's so ridiculous. And even the screws knew this, right? Dinner comes over, Jackson's mushrooms aside, serve the dinner, and and for someone else, it would have been extra bacon and extra stuff, but for me, it was the mushrooms. That was the perk. Someone complained they weren't getting the 4 mushrooms their friends on the other wing were getting on their dinner. They were only getting 2 mushrooms. And why was this happening? So one of the senior officers kicked off about it big time, about food being stolen, and asked the orderlies, we're all told, if this carries on, you will all lose your jobs. And losing an orderly's job in a prison is a big deal because we've worked our way up to the nice cells and the various perks. We can have a shower throughout the day whenever we want to, rather than queuing up in the evening with everyone else. big deal to lose that job. So we were all sort of thrown back by it. And it was that evening myself thinking, how have I got into a position where this woman, who obviously wanted to be a copper but failed the test, wasn't bright enough or whatever, had all this control over my life, over this stupidness over mushrooms. And I'm not asking in a rhetorical sense, seriously, how the hell did I end up here? And it was that evening having that realization of, fuck, I ended up here because this decision, that decision, that decision, but I took without giving much thought to the longer term consequences. So it's the use your powers for good kind of thing. Make decisions in a more thoughtful, planned out manner. Where would you end up then? Because when you do it this way, you end up here. So really, and it's so glib, but it's that master of your own destiny thing.
And so you took that insight, and straight after you got out of prison, you were thinking, I want to start a company. I don't really want to work for someone else. Tell me about that journey of starting a company, because you had, I think you just said you had kind of 6 months kind of runway. That's not a long time.
It's
and
long enough.
That was on benefits. That was on
True. Yeah. So unfortunately, when I had that realization, I still had well over a year left of my sentence to do. But eventually, so all of my co-defendants have been moved to what's called a Category D prison, an open prison, which is much better place to spend your time. And I hadn't. I was still stuck at this prison. And one day, a prison officer took me to one side and said, so everyone called me Jacko in prison. Jacko, why do you think you're still in this prison? But well, that's a good question. That's what I've applied to go to an open prison. And he said, but if we looked around, I said, look, if you get moved to an open prison, the prison has to find 35 grand to pay a teacher to teach the IT course that you're teaching. At the minute, you're doing it for free. Stop teaching that course and you will get moved. But I didn't tell you that. Oh, okay. So I said, right, I don't want to teach this course anymore. I'd rather, and then, well, you'd be locked up in your cell all day. I was like, yep, that's fine. So yeah, a couple of weeks later, I then got moved to an open prison. Mr. Jenkins was right. So I got moved to the open prison. So I had somebody that I'd worked for before I went to prison. I'd helped him turn his business around from being a web hosting company. So from being a consultancy company to doing web hosting and streaming media and whatever else. And with hindsight, I think we made sort of a good turnaround of that business from one that was going downhill to one that was now on the up. He said that he couldn't afford to pay me anything in that year, but wanted to make sure I had something to look forward to when I got out. So he would give me 20% of the company. So that when I got out, I'd go and work for him and had that to look forward to. And I still remember signing this bit of paper that I hadn't read and a glass of champagne or whatever else. But at Ford, you have a better class of criminal. So there's solicitors and ex-police and whatever else. And I happened to have this bit of paper with me, and I had someone look at it, and they said, well, no, this is what's called an option agreement. And actually, if you look at clause 7.2, what it means is that really this isn't worth anything. These shares will always go back to this guy. Yes, you could kind of argue you've got a claim over 20% of the company, but this is worthless. So, oh, okay. Now, at this point, I was at an open prison, so I was being resettled. So I was working outside of the prison, a local company, so I had access to email. So I said to this guy, Ben, I said, what's all this about? And he said, oh, yeah, the lawyers made me do it. I'll get it changed. And around this time, the Prince's Trust came in, talked about helping people from my background to start a business. He was and ahhing about getting this thing changed. And I thought, you know what? Sod it. I'm going to do it myself when I get out. So started writing the business plan in prison. So we said 6 months is a long time. I thought we were talking about the time I had to prepare for it. But what was really good about that, December the 9th, 2002, I was being released from prison. That was the day I was going to start my business. I didn't have I see a lot of people now that and ah over their business plan and they don't pull the trigger and don't start until more planning, no, do it. So I had that date, December 2nd, 2000. So I was starting my business regardless. Because I'd been working for this local company and I'd written a bit of software for them, they needed that supported when I got out of prison. So I managed to negotiate with them that they'd pay me a few £100 a month as a support contract. So I had my first customer.
Nice.
By the time I walked out the door. And then it was just going around finding customers. But what was really great with the Prince's Trust, so I was a one-man web developer. You'd have web designers around, but no one really knew how to do the more complicated stuff, whether it be setting up e-commerce, whether it be a bespoke, this, that, or the other system. Anything clever beyond the marketing site was difficult for web designers to do. But there were a lot of web designers around, which I became friendly with. A lot I met through the Prince's Trust. And I would work with them. So they'd get the client that needed something and they needed this extra clever bit. I'd give them a price for it. They'd mark it up and I'd build it for them.
So you went around finding customers, I'm assuming like ringing, walking around, etc., trying to find customers, web development, kind of support, etc. How did that evolve into Cashflow?
There were a couple of guys I worked with that were other Prince's Trust businesses. One called Milton, a guy called Satiris. Milton was a designer. Satiris did SEO. And we had a lot of mutual clients together. So we ended up sharing the same office and working on a lot of different projects together. And they had the same problem I had, which was your options for doing your accounting invoicing back then were Sage and QuickBooks, and they were really clunky. So they've done what I've done and what most businesses, small businesses back then were doing. I was using a spreadsheet and a Word template. And when I need to invoice someone, I change the customer name, I change the invoice number, change the amount, send it to them, which is fine until you forget to change the number and it's for the same amount. You've got two customers, both owe you 220 quid. One's paid, one hasn't. And you can't work out. You can very easily get into a mess from that setup. So as a programmer, I thought, well, I'll throw something together for myself to use. As a web developer, I've done it as a web front end, as we'd now call it, with a back end database, and use that. And Satiris and Milton both said, that's pretty cool. Can I have a copy of it? It's like, yep, it's a copy and paste. So I have mine in my folder, theirs in their folder. And I was talking to other Princess Trust businesses to ask what they use because I was looking for a better solution than this thing I'd hacked together myself. And they're like, no, we're using spreadsheets as well. But your thing sounds interesting. Can I have a copy? And through a course, again, the Princess Trust put on, realized selling my time by the hour, which is what I was doing as a web developer, there's a limit to that, right? There's only so many hours in a day, and there's only so much you can get away with charging per hour. If you want to make serious money, you need to be selling a product so you can make money in your sleep. And for me, it was obviously a software product that I could go and build. It was like, but what could I possibly go and build? And I remember sitting with Satiris and brainstorming these ideas. And one of them was this little thing that I'd already built, which was doing our invoicing, make that into a proper product for other people to use. And we're going to call it, first we're going to call it Spondoolies, and then realize no one knew how to spell it. It's got an X in it, apparently. Then it was Lollymate. Okay, no, Lollymate's a great name. We'll use that. And we started working on it and started building it out. And someone from the Prince Trust said, look, really great idea, but I think you need to think about the name a bit more. And that's when it became Cashflow. And even until a few years ago, if you looked at the CSS on a website, you'd still see references to Lollymate, the original name. But yeah, that's where it came from. But it didn't start as an accounting package. It started as what I just said, an invoice number, and a customer, paid, not paid. And went through that process of giving it to a whole bunch of customers, giving it to them for free at that point, I think, saying, what can I add to this to make this more useful for you? Gathering feedback, which now would call it PBL, and would prioritize it and iterate over it and keep adding new features. And over a period of time and a lot of focus, that became a full-blown accounting package.
And so you grew naturally. I mean, the fascinating thing about this is now, a lot of entrepreneurs, they have playbooks, they read books, etc. You came to a lot of this organically without having to read the Lean Startup or whatever else it
hadn't been written, right? So back then, so now, if I start a project now, you've got Bootstrap that will give you a nice design for it. You've got various frameworks you can build from. You've got Azure and AWS hosting. Back then, we were co-locating our own physical servers. If the server was running slow, you would get in a taxi to the data center and put more RAM in the server. So it's a complete, and the playbooks like the Eric Ries stuff, whatever, they hadn't been written. The term SaaS hadn't been coined. We were one of, if not the first SaaS businesses in the UK. Not because I had any great foresight about the technology, but because I was a web developer. So rather than building something in Visual Studio for the desktop, it made sense for me to just build something on the web. But yeah, SaaS, web apps, the cloud, those terms just weren't around. This is 2004.
And you grew quite naturally as well, gathering feedback, doing the features, etc. So I'm assuming you grew through these customers, made it free, and then you obviously started getting people to pay for it. You recruited, and this was organic. There wasn't any funding, nothing like that.
No, exactly. And that's my preferred route even now is to not get involved with VCs. I've been around a lot of VC-backed companies, but my preference is to retain as much of the equity in the founding team as you can. And again, it maybe goes back to this whole being the master of your own destiny thing, right? If you take VC money, you're not so much that they can dictate your path, more that you're answerable to them. If you're taking investors' money, you better damn sure make sure you return it, right? So maybe it's the scared of the responsibility of that. But no, I prefer to bootstrap, and customers' money is always the best way to build anything. And that way you also know you're on the right path in terms of what you're building because people are paying for it. So yeah, certainly prefer that route.
And so how many years from then to your exit?
So if you were to draw a chart of whether it's user numbers, revenue, growth rates, or whatever else, they're all just smooth lines. There's no this part where this happened and it jumped up. So 2004 was probably the first paying customers. A few years later, someone offered to buy it for £2 million, which felt like a hell of a lot of money at the time. I very nearly took it. But I had a very good mentor who then became shareholder, investor, chairman in the business, Lord Young, who was an enterprise advisor for David Cameron. He was in manufacturer's cabinet, ran cable and wireless. So he's got a huge amount of business experience. So he guided me in the right direction. We said no to that 2 million. 2010 got to the point where I felt I'd got the business as far as I could. Wasn't enjoying it anymore. Was really struggling to keep the growth up. to motivate myself and the teams that tried to sell the business, and went through the whole formal process of appointing an M&A firm and everything else, and spoke to so many companies. And I was convinced actually it's going to be really easy, that we'd talk to Sage, who we'd been a real pain in the ass for, and say, right, we're up for sale, let's do a deal. And their instant reaction was, no thanks, not interested. So we have to do a proper process now. And got nowhere in that, because somebody I met in that process, a guy called Subra Iyer. Subra founded WebEx and sold it to Cisco for hundreds of millions of pounds. So a very experienced entrepreneur. And he came and looked at the business and said, look, it isn't for me, but you're really interested in it, and I'm in London for 3 more days. Do you want to spend some time just having a chat? So I spent a lot of time that summer of 2010 having coffee in Bond Street with Subra. And what he pointed out, so at that point, we already got good PR. And I'd already been open about my background, and that helped generate a lot of PR. And he said, look, the thing with you and your story is you get so much credit for how well you've done and not raised any VC money, no institutional capital, and grown this business. But what no one's pointed out to you is the real miracle of what you've done is you've done this with no C-suite. What's the C-suite? He said, well, your CTO, your technology, your marketing, your sales, your everything. So you say you don't enjoy doing the CEO job anymore. You're not doing the CEO job. If you build a decent team around you, 1, more people will be interested in buying your business because it's a going concern. It's not dependent on you. 2, you'll have the headspace and the support to grow this business. You're not short on vision. You know where to take it. You're just struggling to. And that was a real eye-opener for me. So no one was interested in buying a business in 2010 for exactly the reasons Subra said. And so spent the next 2 years building a decent management team, getting a plan together with how we're going to grow the business, brought in a CEO coach because I wasn't a great CEO at that point, and really got focused on growing the business. And then, of course, the knock comes on the door where someone does want to buy it. And that was in 2013 where we sold the business, and could easily not done at that point, could have left the team to it and carried on growing it and stepped away from it.
And is that still non-disclosed who you sold it to?
So it's sold to Iris Software. It's been published in lots of places that it was £20 million, but I can't confirm or deny it.
Okay, all right. And through that period, at some point, you had a lot of interactions with the GoCardless team. They helped you set up direct debit for your customers to charge your customers. So tell me more about that experience, your first engagement with them.
Yeah. So it wasn't so much for charging our customers. I don't think we ever got to that point. That's it. Let me rewind. So we were, like everyone was by that point, using credit cards. If you wanted to sign up for our service, you would enter your credit card details. We would repeat bill you every month. But you've got to remember that the business we were in was helping other companies manage their accounts. So we're helping you come along, raise your invoice. We had really nice automation features in there in terms of if the invoice was unpaid, the system automatically sent chaser letters that get increasingly more aggressive. So really keen on the whole automation side of things. And one of the things we'd set up as well was, because we're generating PDFs for you of your invoices, is if you had what they called a merchant account. So when you to get a credit card processing agreement with one of these payment processors, if you had that and you had the details, you could plug it into Cashflow and it'll put a button on your invoice that says pay now, which is great. But actually that whole process of getting a merchant account set up is really difficult, especially in the early days of trading as a business. And a lot of our customers were in their first year or two of trading. So that was a lovely feature if you could use it. Then the GoCardless guys came along, and I still remember, I think it was Matt, Tom, and Hiroki, the 3 of them turned up into the office. Would have been on Tooley Street, I think, by then. So we were at the office in London. It was an interesting time in terms of sort of startup and tech in London at that time. So I'm guessing, you must know what year it was they got started. I'll be led by you.
In 2011 that they raised it.
Sounds about right. Yeah. So they hadn't actually launched at that point, but they came in, and I've only found out since from I can't remember if it's Hiroki or Matt, but someone told me, well, actually, I think part of their founding story they tell employees. At this point, they were thinking about, actually, is there any mileage in this? Has this idea got any legs? And they come in and said, basically, we're an API. We can come along, piggyback on our direct debit that we've got with RBS, and you or your customer. Well, actually, I think they're trying to sell it to me to use it to bill our customers. I was like, never mind me using it. I've got 10,000 people behind me, our customers at that point, that would kill for this. Are you really telling me that they can give you their bank details, you collect a direct debit for them and put it in, and we can access this via an API? And they're like, yes, please, we want this. Because for me, I'm now seeing all of my customers that couldn't get a merchant account, couldn't get this button on their invoice to take payments, now can. And the costs were, I think, cheaper than processing credit cards. So even some of our customers that did have a merchant account would probably want to switch to this. And the direct debit system was out there, right, but it was inaccessible for a small business, and certainly inaccessible from a technology standpoint. This is the banking systems, right? There are no REST APIs in that world at that point. So I immediately saw the potential in this, and And before they even left, I was like, right, I want the API docs and I'm going to start playing with this. And for me, at this point, so bear in mind, I've started growing a management team now. So I've got competent sales. So I've got some time on my hands, and the stuff I love is the technology and love the look of this stuff. So I want to get my hands on it myself. I think this was a Friday that they'd come in. They gave me the API docs that afternoon. And by Monday, I'd built the integration, built it over the weekend. Because it's so easy to use their API.
You were on holiday at the time, I think.
So I think I was about to go on holiday. So that might have been what sort of focused my mind on, right, I want to get this done before I go. But even now, I'm very quick as an engineer and still do integrations with other platforms, especially around APIs, much more quickly than they're used to. So I'm all used to being told by third parties that we work with, sorry, you've done it in 3 days. This normally takes at least 3 months. But that's because I'm full stack, right? So I can do the database, I can do the back end code, and I can do the front end. Plus, I've got good product sense, so I don't need to sit down, work out user journeys. I'll make it up as I go, and it comes out okay. Not as good as it could be if someone else had done it. And I think even with the GoCardless code I wrote, that was refactored 3 months later by one of my engineers, said, okay, now let's do it properly. But when you want a proof of concept, you want to see how your customer's going to pick it up. A 2-day hack together solution works.
It sounds like the perfect fit, right? Because they obviously needed a first customer. You had access to like 10,000. And at the same time, you wanted to provide more value. And it was a differentiation for you versus your competition.
Yeah, and there's a good PR point as well. So it's the whole, you want to be constantly seen at the cutting edge. And we were their launch partner. So when they launched, we were, I think, the only platform that's integrated with them. So there was clearly going to be a buzz around what they were doing, especially because they're taking some VC money, and I think at that point, or certainly were planning to. But there's a lot of this bouncing off other companies in the space at that time. So they're a part of that as well. But really, I see so many integrations, collaborations, and a lot of it is marketing stuff, but little substance underneath it. When it works brilliantly is when the marketing stuff works, but actually there's some real substance and value underneath it. And in that partnership, there was. Worked well for us, as you say, worked well for our customers. Everyone was a winner in that situation.
So that's obviously what gave you the faith to kind of make that decision. What stood out to you when you first met the GoCardless team in terms of people? Because I assume over the years, your relationship would have evolved as well, right? It wouldn't have just been integration, etc. What really stood out to you?
For me, it was the fact that there was a team of them that were all very aligned. So there's a bit of envy on my, because I was a solo founder. So I had guys Satiris early on. We went our separate ways very early on. So it was, although I had a management team around me, I was a solo founder. So it was nice to see the three of them aligned, and they could almost finish each other's sentences in the pitch of what it is. They all knew what they were building. But also the fact they didn't seem to realize huge potential of what they had, I don't think, at that time. I mean, to me, as soon as I saw it, it's like, this is revolutionary. I don't think they were as excited about what they had as I was, perhaps. So there was that. But also they were very clearly very intelligent guys, right? They knew what they were doing. So there's a lot of faith in them as individuals. I'm not joining up with a couple of fly-by-nights. They were serious and intentful in what they were doing.
And also, you're vastly different from background as people, right? Completely different backgrounds to you. So it's interesting to see how you guys kind of made the jump and the leap of faith into actually doing that integration.
Yeah, it's that whole background thing. That's one of the things I love about business, right? So I didn't spend much time at school, but when I did, if you use words of more than 3 syllables, you're going to get yourself in trouble. Is what I said at the beginning, right? I think you're a bit special. What? Because I use a word with 3 syllables? It's just the inverted intellectual snobbery, I guess you'd call it. And that's one of the things I loved very quickly when I went into business, was there is none of that. And also the whole background thing, nobody actually cares where you're from. What they care about is, can you do what you said you'll do at the price you said you'll do it?
Yeah. I think, coming obviously in business, there's so many people from so many diverse backgrounds. It's actually what makes it really interesting, isn't it? And I find your story fascinating. After you founded, you exited Cashflow, you've now gone on to start another business. So when did you exit Cashflow? Just to be 2014, did you say?
2013, exited Cashflow. Built something else called Supdate, which was a sort of more of a project for myself to get back into the programming, which was a shareholder update tool. Because Lord Young insisted on an update every month. It wasn't so much because he was going to read it, it was more to make sure I was paying attention to the business. But so a new email to Lord Young, subject line, March update, and then you've got your flashing cursor. So where do I start? And then you've got the phone ringing because you've got to do this, that, and the other. So that whole process of monthly updates was a pain in the arse. But in those 2 years, 3 years, 2010, 2013, of really grown up as a business, and getting coaching as a CEO, we really nailed that process. And it is a process. So Supdate was about productizing that process of building investor updates. And so built that. And that was okay. It was ticking over. It was never going to be a massive project or a big startup. I mean, I just don't think the market was there for it necessarily. So that was ticking over in the background. I had various other things. So I gave a big lump of money to the Prince's Trust, so involved there as a patron. Got involved with starting a charity. So my book was 4,000 Days. The charity is Code 4,000. And we go into prisons, teach inmates how to program and help them get jobs in the industry when they get released. So that was up and running, but again, not taking a huge amount of my time. Invested in a HR software company called Breathe HR, which became a very big success, certainly from an investor perspective. And involved in a few companies. And it was a running joke that, so these guys needed web-based payroll with an API, so they could drive payroll programmatically. So you can do payroll at scale. Breathe HR needed it, so they could integrate it into their platform. A company called Crunch that I'm involved with as a shareholder needed it. And running joke on the boards there and with the CEO was, oh, Duane, you should go and build it. You could do this. Actually, I'm not going anywhere near this kind of stuff again. Because I remember selling Cashflow and the realization I'm never going to have to debug a VAT return. Yes. Done too much of that. And the received wisdom with payroll was you can't do an MVP, right? You have to support every feature on day one. Otherwise, no one's going to use it. Just because none of your staff are pregnant today, they might be tomorrow. So you need to support maternity pay and everything else. 2, the annual updates that you need to do are really cumbersome and you can't just, a CRM or HR platform, you can kind of leave. There's continued investment in payroll and it's hard work to do. 3, it's commoditized. You can't charge much more than £1 per payslip. So there's all these reasons why you should not go near payroll software. I remember, again, I even know the chair I was sitting in the front room of, Lord, I need something to do. I need a challenge. And it's like, well, this is supposedly impossible, this whole payroll thing. I'll have a stab at that. And if it goes nowhere, it doesn't matter, right? Because it's more about the challenge. And I remember having my head in the laptop for about 3 months, looking up to my wife and saying, this has got to be worth £1 million now, what I've built here. So I remember the chair I was sitting on and head in the laptop, building this out, adding this feature, adding that feature. And it really is a case of if I knew how much was involved at that point, I wouldn't have bothered because you get over one hurdle and there's another hurdle and another hurdle. I remember looking up to my wife and saying, this has got to be worth £1 million now already. Like, what, how can it be? And I said, knowing the market and what's out there and what this thing I built can do, easily worth £1 million. A couple months later, I looked up and I said, this is worth £2 million now. She just laughed at me. But relatively quickly, it got to a place where I built, and today it's still the only web-based payroll with a comprehensive API. So it's API first. The web application that users are using to use it can only talk to the API. So what typically happens, and in Cashflow is a great example of this, you build your application, your developer community wants an API, so you build an API, but the API always becomes a second-class citizen. So you add support for departments in your UI. It's not in your API yet, and your developer community is saying, can we get access to this? And you will at some point. The way this is built, if you add departments, you have to add it in the API first. So it forces the API to be a first-class citizen. And I knew there were a number of companies in the UK. I mean, so Iris have somewhere between 10 and 20 payroll products. We're not even sure. So I work at Iris at the moment. So we're not even sure how many payroll products we've got. Different people we talk to will give you different answers. We've been very acquisitive as a business. And so they have a whole bunch of payroll products. Sage have a whole bunch of payroll products. Access Group. So there's these 3 companies that I know this technology would be a lot of use for. So it ended up being a little bit competitive. And at the end of 2020, I ended up selling that to Iris.
Okay. So you end of 2020, you sell that to Iris. I haven't looked, are the figures disclosed?
So it's a standard thing that you don't disclose. And I was at an event that was recorded the other day where our CEO told somebody that it was just under 10 million. I didn't tell anybody that, she did.
Okay. All right. Got you. And so now you're working at Iris. Like, Duane, we know that you're a serial entrepreneur and you have a habit of getting the itch. Like, what's your future hold? Have you got anything in the pipeline? Where do you see yourself 5, 10, 15 years?
So although I bang on about how important it is to have a plan and to take these decisions with an intent in mind, I'm really rubbish at long-term planning for my own personal sort of career. I struggle to picture where I'll be in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And if you ask me any point over the last 10 years, I'd have struggled. I think Iris is really, so I've done my earn out, right? So I could walk away now, I would lose nothing. But I think Iris is really interested in terms of the big products that they've got and how that can hang together in a much more efficient way. And there's stuff we do technology and product management wise that can be so much better. But I don't know whether that is realistic to expect to be able to do that in a large organization. Is it even possible? So again, it's a challenge, right? So it's the intellectual challenge with a financial return on it if it's done right. That is really appealing. But there is the A, can that be done? And B, can I operate in that environment, right? Because being entrepreneurial from that background and then into big corporate, and we're over 2,000 employees, it's a big business. Whether that's going to work or not is another matter. But time will tell, and I'll find something to do. But yeah, I need, and the reason Staffology came about, I need something to jump out of bed in the morning thinking about. This is what I'm working on. And sometimes you fall asleep thinking about it. I'm no good at this whole portfolio of interests. So Adam Howe grew Fairsail, sold it to Sage for a lot of money. And he's now got a portfolio of stuff that he works on, and he loves it. He can switch from this business to this business to 10, 15 business. I can't do that. I need one and very deep on it. Ticking over in the background, but I need the main thing. No idea what that'll be. I couldn't say whether in 3-6 months' time, whether I'll be still at Iris doing some interesting stuff or have moved on. We'll see.
It's really interesting because a common thread that I find between some of the GoCardless team and yourself is that there's a depth. Like you guys like going really deep on a particular topic.
Yeah.
Steve going really deep on the travel industry, Gray and team going, Harry, etc., going really deep on the dependency management, etc. There's just this incessant need to go deeper and deeper. And a lot of the time I find that people that want to be entrepreneurs, they go too broad perhaps and not deep enough. They get bored. So it's been really fascinating to have you on the call. I want to ask one last question. If you had a piece of advice for any entrepreneurs out there, what would it be?
Entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs? Entrepreneurs already know what they're doing, right? They're cracking.
Let's just do want-be entrepreneurs.
I see a lot of people that talk about ideas, and it's the whole action speak louder than words, right? Go and do something, even if it's the wrong step, that it's a misstep, you'll learn something from it. So just do stuff, get moving, because a plan and an idea is pretty much worthless. You need to actually execute. But for those that are already running businesses, something I see a lot is on the fundraising side, is people that want to go and raise X million on a valuation of Y million. And then when you say, what are you going to do with the money? They've got a loose idea, but it always seems to be the fundraise comes and then what they're going to do with it. And something I learned, because I thought I needed to raise some money and went for a process with somebody that helped me get my head around it. Something I learned is do your plan first of what you want to do, then cost it. That will tell you how much money you need. And that will then tell you, do you need to raise money or not? For so many people, raising money is almost the end goal. And that's a victory. And then they'll go and grow the business. It's the wrong way around, in my view.
So execution is king, and be more considered about raising financing.
There you go. I need to be as articulate and as succinct as you. Exactly that. Yeah.
Awesome. You've been fantastic. Thank you, Duane.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you've gained value from this episode, please drop us a 5-star rating on Spotify or a like on YouTube. See you for the next one.